So different dimensions are present in our everyday reality. They're accessible. They're right there. They're right there. And it is our perspective to perceive them that dials us into them. And it is a matter of perspective. So that means that the physical actually, well, it changes in the sense that it doesn't change, vertically. It doesn't change that way. Vertically is the frequency. It goes higher and lower. Very, very specific every frequency is a dimension that resonates at that frequency. And then, of course, into the small, it's limitless, it's infinite, and also into the large, it's infinite. We do have limitations as to the potential that we can access. And those limitations are consciously embedded, consciously put into place by our higher consciousness, by our higher self, by our it is the soul. At what level? Because we are the soul here at the physical level of it, at the identified with the human level with the soul, identified with the body level and the story of the body level of the soul. And then, of course, we can also wake up, that's what waking up is, to more expanded, deeper levels of the soul. And that means that our higher self, our soul, which is represented and exists in higher dimensions, and is what its body is, where we are, the physical body is like a babushka doll, the smallest in the babushka doll, the densest in the babushka doll, is that the tip of that soul into the densest density is the physical body. And it goes, however, all the way up to a greater and greater body. However, at the same time, that greater and greater body, as of seventh dimension, spreads into a collective body of approximately around 12 souls, individual souls. Every individual soul, by the way, has a twin soul. That's really, really nice to know. And then as of seventh dimension, you know, if you expand in your consciousness, and then when you expand in your consciousness, you also expand in perspective, and you also expand in your body beyond the physical body. You reach and feel into the light body, even though it's very, 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 very subtle. But your awareness reaches that far when your awareness is at that frequency and at that scope. And as of seventh, it is a collective body of around 12, and that is called the monad. Also referred to as higher self, but higher self can already be the soul, is also referred to as the soul, the individual soul, at the frequential level, the dimension where it is aware of itself as a soul and is not sleeping, is not identified as the human body. Now, when I say this, it means solely identified, because even though I am identified as my human, it doesn't stop there. It goes beyond that and includes everything that is beyond that, even though I'm not always aware of that. I know this as an understanding, and I know that we are all in the process of embodying our ever greater soul, ever higher self. And ascension is, well, that is actually that is what ascension is. So for ascension to happen, descension has to happen first. Incarnation also is this. Incarnation has to happen for, well, actually, yeah, well, incarnation or a densification, that is already descension. So when we expand in consciousness, we also shift to a higher dimension. Now, not necessarily the threshold from 3 to 4 or from 4 to 5 completely, entirely. Parts of us, percentages of us are vibrating at that level, and others can be vibrating lower, and they can be all over the place, like every single cell has its own vibration, every single organ has its own vibration. It is a certain frequency. Once it's saturated in a frequency that traverses a threshold to a different to another higher dimension, let's say from 4 to 5, for example, there is a huge shift that takes place. However, most of the time this shift happens gradually. And from 4 to 5, the shift is that all fear dissolves. And how does fear dissolve? It comes up just like bubbles. It's because fear is held in the unconscious, in the subconscious, unconscious. Even when you are consciously afraid, unless it is an immediate threat to the survival of the body, that's a mechanism of the body, that's a whole other thing. Otherwise, fear is in the mind, based on a belief, on an interpretation of reality. And this dissolves in fifth. Once we are established in fifth dimension, that means that we have embodied the frequencies that are higher than 528 hertz. Then we are aware of our collective self. We become aware of the monad. We become aware of that part of our soul, because it is like we have embodied now the individual soul. And so we become physically aware of the next higher experience of ourselves, our next layer of expanded consciousness and body. And that is aware of the collective, where you are connected into a greater soul. And that monad soul is completely aware of, again, the greater collective, the avatar soul that it is connected to, and so forth. And it continues into Rishi. So it is, and this is one being in many, many, many bodies. And you are one of them. And that is, you are a fractal of that. But you have access to it because you are one with it. And of course, in the end, it's all one, you know? And the difference is whether there is awareness of that in everyday life, in the body, as you go about this life, incarnate in this body. If there is awareness of that, not just as a concept, as an understanding, but actually physically, then there is no more fear frequency in your body, no more fear vibration in your body. And according to your vibration, which is according to the vibration of your soul, in combination with your egoic mind, coming through, going through the filter of the egoic mind that is identified, there where it is completely identified, those aspects of you that are not conscious of the truth of who you are, they are vibrating in fear still. And that is what keeps you tethered to the lower dimensionality of physicality, where fear is still a possibility, it's still present, and all the negative emotions. And this, however, is a natural process and also a conscious choice. Because it is through the fear is what draws us down into the lower dimensions. Now, for example, I could be sitting here and having a horrible experience, being in fear. Someone could be sitting next to me, being in heaven, in the same situation, same place, being in heaven, because they are experiencing it from a broadened perspective, from an expanded consciousness, more awake to itself, to oneself, more awake to the one, to the oneness of all life, to the truth. Because that is the one truth, that separation is an illusion. That is the one truth that makes all the difference in the world between heaven and hell. And we are all striving for, yearning for heaven. And it is here. It is always here. Heaven is always here. Yet it is squeezed out and seemingly unattainable when the experience is interpreted, when there is fear. Fear is what squeezes heaven out, what makes heaven seemingly non-existent and seemingly unattainable.